Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome to another video on my channel Hairliciously. If you guys are new to the channel, please make sure to hit that subscribe button so you guys are updated on hair loss and hair transplant topics. Visit my website at HAIRLICIOUSLY.com to purchase your microneedling devices, which are scientifically proven to stimulate hair growth. My low-level lace therapy cap, DH debulking shampoo and serum, hair growth vitamins, and a few other products for those who are suffering from hair loss. So it's been a while since I've done a celebrity type of hair loss analysis. So in today's video, I wanted to talk about Chris Evans and give you guys my analysis on his hair loss situation. There's been quite a few people who have been speculating that he's had a hair transplant over the years. So I wanted to deep dive into this topic, take a look at some of his before and after photos over the years, and give you guys my 2 cents on what I believe has actually transpired. He's actually one of my favorite actors, and probably most people know him through his role as Captain America and Avengers. And unlike most Hollywood actors, he's actually been pretty open about losing his hair, about his whole hair loss journey. He doesn't go around trying to hide it, and there was an article dated back in 2011 from US Magazine titled "Chris Evans Admits I'm Losing My Hair." And basically, he admitted he's losing his hair during an interview at the MTV Awards outing. He stated that the fear is that this role, and he's talking about Captain America and the Avengers obviously, can span 10 years. So I can be doing this character until I'm 40. I'm supposed to be this superior human. He can't be balding. How horrible would it be if this superior man has male pattern baldness? And so this interview that he had was when he was around 29 years old. So he's obviously self-conscious about his hair loss, his whole hair loss situation. And he apparently believes that being a bald superhero protagonist can't simply exist in this world, and still seems to uphold and reinforce the negative stigma on hair loss, as bald people are seen as being less attractive. I think this is stupid because, we have a lot of actors who are, bald straight up North 7. Actors like Dwayne Johnson, Jason Statham, Bruce Willis, Vin Diesel, who are just doing fine. So whatever he said is, I think, just nonsense and isn't really warranted. At least in my opinion. Anyway, this is a photo of him in 2011 during the same time frame of when this interview took place, and we can still see a slightly receded hairline with some temporal recession, potentially a Nord 1.5, but it's nothing too severe. And the funny thing is that most people won't even notice that he's losing hair at this point, unless you're also losing hair yourself or you're super critical about losing hair. And if you were to show this photo of him to a bunch of women, I'm willing to bet that 100% of them will say that he is not balding. And even most men who see this photo tend to agree to this as well. Let's go ahead and take a look at some of his photos in his earlier years, and then we're going to go ahead and compare them to some of the more recent photos in the past couple years to see how his hair loss has actually transpired. And we're also going to look for any signs of, potential signs of him having undergone a hair transplant. So this was Chris back in 2001 when he was around 20 years of age. We can see a very nice juvenile hairline with a widow's peak, and there's absolutely no signs of temporal recession. Although his hairline isn't necessarily straight, and it's rather a bit recessed just a little bit as it goes up at a slight angle. I will say that his temporal points, however, aren't really the strongest, and he doesn't have temporal points that, typically extend out of the outer edge of the eyebrows like most non-balding hairlines. And oftentimes, people who do show signs of androgenetic alopecia can also start receding and thinning at the temporal points as well. But at this point, I think that is just how his overall hairline is and his temporal points, and we're also going to later assess to see how his temporal points have actually held up. So fast forward to 2004, we can still see a pretty good close-up to his hairline, and notice that M shape that has taken place. He's still somewhere around a Norwood 1.5, not quite a Norwood 2. It's hard to say if there were any progression of hair loss since 2001, to be honest. It doesn't look like it in my opinion, at least not to his hairline. Even if it did progress, it would have been very minimal. Here's a side shot to show his weak temporal points once again, and oftentimes this may be a good indication of a potential onset of androgenetic alopecia, and this may unfortunately be his first onset of hair loss, as it appears a bit thinner than usual. Fast forward again to 2008, there's really not any notable changes to his hairline. Still looks to be a Norwood 1.5, Norwood 2, with the slight widow's peak that is still intact. Another side shot showing his temporal points that are still a bit receded, but not a noticeable difference from 2004. In 2012, his hairline still has that typical M shape reflecting a Norwood 2, although his temporal points in this photo seem to have receded a bit further back, as we can see, more scalp on both edges of his forehead. But this also might be due to the different lighting environment. But overall, it is still looking pretty good, and there really hasn't been yet, another noticeable difference since 2004. There's no signs of him having a hair transplant at this point, at least in my opinion, and he really shouldn't, since his hair loss, if any, has been relatively minimal at this point. In 2016, at age 35, we can yet see another good headshot of his frontal hairline. The widow's peak is still intact with nice soft hairline that we can see. Overall hairline still looks to be a Norwood 2 or under, and the side profile of his temporal points still look pretty good with no signs of any noticeable thinning. At this point, there's nothing out of the ordinary that is really giving me red flags that he's had a hair transplant, and his hair loss has actually been pretty stable in my opinion for the past decade. It really hasn't changed much from, how it was back in the early 2000s. So at this point, given that he was already aware that he was somewhat losing hair, at least to a small degree, where he personally stated in 2011 in that interview, and being somebody who definitely would not have accepted hair loss in his role as Captain America. Very likely he is on some type of hair loss preventative measures through either a 5-alpha reductase inhibitor like finasteride or dutasteride, or even an anti-androgen. I think that there is a pretty good chance that during this time he kind of hopped on finasteride on the first onset of hair loss during the late 2000s, potentially around 2010 or 2011, to stop the progress of miniaturization, especially after having been given the role of Captain America. And during this time, he was also signed up for 3 Captain America movies and 3 Avengers films. And well knowing that his role can span for 10 more years, until he's 40, he did what it took to basically stop balding, because to him a balding superhero protagonist was not going to be acceptable. Let's go ahead and take a look at some more recent photos in 2020 and 2021, which yet show a pretty solid hairline. Still looking like a Norwood 2, maybe a Norwood 2.5, not quite a Norwood 3, although the side shot showing one side of his temporal point is looking a bit more receded and thinned out, and we can better visualize a more receded temple that is creeping in almost parallel to his ear. But overall, his hair maintenance has been pretty good, considering that he has nearly the same hairline from over a decade ago, and given that he potentially is on hair loss medication like finasteride to block the conversion of testosterone to DHT, he has been able to keep most of his hair. Believe it or not, there are a lot of actors who are presumably taking finasteride or dutasteride that really haven't disclosed it to the public, and obviously there is no reason for you to do that unless you're really open about stuff like hair loss. But who would want to do that unless you really want to? But Chris Evans has been lucky, considering that his hair loss over the years hasn't really been drastic, and given that he is likely still on hair loss medication, at least in my opinion, he's able to slow it down from further miniaturization, from further balding. The thing is that he was most likely proactive on the first onset of hair loss and took action before it got worse. For most people, this is going to be key. The more that you guys wait to start on hair loss medication, the more aggressive forms of treatment that you have to intervene with, and you'll likely continue to have to play a game of constant catch-up. Finasteride is FDA approved in the US, and most men who are suffering from androgen alopecia will end up having to resort to this medication unless you want to mess with other experimental anti-androgens. And I feel like most people will be able to reap the benefits from taking it without having any adverse side effects. Talk about finasteride, side effects do exist, although a very small minority of people experience this, and most people who are taking finasteride won't have to worry about these issues. But with that said, side effects do exist, they are real, and people do experience things like sexual dysfunction, low libido, erectile dysfunction, cognitive issues, mood swings, especially if you're using a drug like finasteride that alters your hormonal profile and also inhibits a good chunk of DHT. Some studies do show that 5-alpha reductase inhibitors can exert anti-neuroprotective effects in the brain, which could, potentially lead to things like depression, anxiety. So at the end of the day, you guys really need to really determine and weigh in the risk of taking hair loss medication and see if it's going to be worth risking for the sake of your hair. People who are already losing hair can already suffer from, the mental and psychological agony. And studies do show that psychiatric disorders are more common in people with, suffering from hair loss than in the general public. So at this point, do you continue to bald and not take medication and suffer, psychologically, mentally, or take a risk on the possibility of the low side effects in the first place and reap the benefits of being able to maintain your hair, possibly regrow it? It's really up to you, and ultimately, the choice depends on each person's situation and risk tolerance to medication. And given, his progressive yet mild form of hair loss with not much noticeable difference to how his hairline or, the temporal points are have been in recent photos, I believe that Chris Evans did not have a hair transplant. There's no indication of hairline or temple recovery. It's not like he went from a Norwood 3 to a Norwood 1, and everything else about his hairline, his density, they all look pretty natural to me. He's lucky enough to respond favorably to treatment if he indeed is taking finasteride, and I think that overall his hairline looks pretty good, so far for his age. His brother, Scott Evans, also has a decent amount of hair in this photo dated 2019. And he also resembles a natural receding hairline around the Norwood 2.5. And his father also still has a good amount of hair with a receded hairline as well. So this also further kind of supports the fact that Chris's hairline is indeed all natural and that he is likely on hair loss medication to slow the progression of miniaturization, let alone good genetics that aren't afflicted with severe hair loss. So that's all I have to say, guys. Let me know your thoughts on Chris Evans' hair in the comment section below. Like I said, I'm not 100% sure that he's taking finasteride or some other type of hair loss medication since he never disclosed it openly. But given that hair loss is progressive, in its very nature, given that his hairline was almost in the same condition of how it was a decade ago without any red flags of a potential hair transplant, and given that he did disclose back in 2011 that he was suffering from hair loss, the only logical reasoning for him maintaining his hair is that he is taking hair loss treatment like finasteride to inhibit the conversion of, DHT, which is known as the main havoc that causes hair loss. So that's all I have for today, guys. Thanks for watching. Make sure to like this video. If you guys have any suggestions on what other celebrities I should analyze, let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I will talk to you guys in my next video. Take care.